Okay, so for those of you who are joining for the first time, and those of you who haven't seen this, it's just really a reiteration of what we're trying to do. My role is to try and inspire you to think about the choices that you're going to make. And incidentally, our subject today is about choices, the first part of it, and actually to try and start deriving personal excellence. Personal excellence, what does that mean? You trying to be the best version of who you are. That's what personal excellence is. Being able to get up every day and look in the mirror and say, I'm really proud of myself and I'm doing the best that I can. And performance, you being able to say to yourself, what I'm trying to achieve, I am moving forward towards that goal, that milestone. The earlier you start, the better. It's a bit by bit process that you develop over time. And once you can gather those two together, then you're actually in the space of what we know as self-mastery. And self-mastery is critical for leaders. Leaders who don't have self-mastery create the challenges, some of which you as the youth are experiencing today and are going to have to fix later on somewhere down the line. Whether it's environmental issues, whether it's issues related to integrity, whatever it is, there's a lot of work that you're going to have to be doing to repair some of the things that have happened in the past. And in order to be able to do that, self-mastery is going to be critical. So you are, as I repeat, the future leaders. Future, as I always say, is not in a year or two or 10 years from now, it's tomorrow. Some of the things that you can implement and influence start tomorrow. And as you can see with some of the things that have been going on in the world with regards to massive changes that are taking place. So that's what we're trying to do. Those of you who know a little bit about value add, these are the areas and places that we go. And we're live and interactive over Zoom. But the objective is to hybrid this into the future and create a situation or a scenario where we can be in contact with each other as well. So we're building future generations to make informed and better choices about the values they want to develop as personal leaders and the implications of that in terms of their communities. That's what you are going to do. What you're witnessing in South Africa right now is a consequence of historical things with regards to people's decisions and choices, which are now affecting us. Every time you have a power cut, remember that. Someone made the wrong choice somewhere back in the past to give us the consequences that we have today. To effect positive changes in the leaders of tomorrow. So that's what we try to do and inspire you about the choices that you're going to make so that you make better choices for tomorrow. So we did preparation and now we're doing choice, which is the module that we're going to, which we're going to get into now. So let us kick off. Program 2, which is choice. A powerful, powerful statement, which says, may your choices reflect your hopes and not your fears. And that's a quote from Nelson Mandela. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But just think about that. Your choices that you make, every single time you make a choice, may it reflect your hopes and not your fears. So that starts begging the question in terms of some of the choices that we're making. Are they reflecting our hopes or our fears? I remember I was not one to love studying. So where I could avoid to study, I avoided it. But it was as a consequence of my fear of believing that even if I did study, I might not necessarily achieve what I was hoping to achieve. So these things are ingrained as small as that. The decision that you make tomorrow, the choice that you make tomorrow, is it defined by the fact that you have fear, or is it defined by the fact that you have hope? And I think that's really powerful. The reason why I like this subject so much is because even at my age of 52, I'm consistently asking the question, when the person did what they did, was it a choice, or were they directed or had no mechanism to otherwise do what they did other than choice? And it's you know, as you go through life, you're going to begin to discover that people do things, and then you're going to have to ask yourself the question, but why did you do that? And ultimately, I have come to the conclusion that a lot of the decisions that we make are out of personal choice. So what is choice? What is the definition of choice? It's a variety of You remember, think of going to, back in the day when we used to go and have a buffet, you'd have a whole buffet and you'd walk through that buffet place. A variety of options were presented to you and you would have to make a choice. It's a number to choose from, to decide from, right? It's a preference. You make choices out of preferences. To select, right? To pick out, to opt for, to fix on, to decide on a particular path or direction or intention for yourself. So reading it fully, a choice is a variety of, a number of, to choose from, to decide from, to prefer, to select, to pick out, to opt for, to fix on, to decide on a particular path or direction for yourself. So the path may be the decision of whether or not what you're going to eat. The path may be the decision on whether or not what you're going to study, etc., etc., etc. But these all have implications on the direction for you. And you'll see later on why that is the case. Because sometimes when you look at yourself today, you have to ask yourself the question as to what extent are who I am today as a result of some of the choices that I made yesterday. Just as a matter of interest, I remember at school, you know, there were always two groups of people. There were the group of people who were the smokers, and there were a group of people who were not the smokers. And it was always interesting from that construct that we were already making choices about which group we were going to fit into. If you wanted to look cool, because back in my day when you were at school, smoking looked cool. It was hip, it was happening, you know. And then you either were in that corner or you were in the corner where somewhere in the back of your mind you realize that despite the fact it might look cool, hip, and happening, despite the fact that it might look like it's rebellious to my parents, there is just something wrong with this that I'm not going to fall for. My wife always talks about the fact that when she was a boarder at school, there were always those kids who would jump over the wall. And then there were those kids who didn't jump over the wall. Those are choices. So we've been making choices all the time. Literally from birth, I see my 6-year-old daughter making choices and decisions about what it is that she wants to eat, who she wants to play with, etc., etc. So we've been making choices to be friends with somebody or not. We're making choices constantly about which sports we like, which sports we want to participate in. I'm always trying to get my sons to participate in sport when they were, you know, younger at school. You know, who to date. That's a big one as you get older. Those are choices. Whether to attend classes or not. In varsity, I was not the strongest at attending classes. Get up in the morning not feeling quite the need to attend the class. But that's a choice. Whether to study or to do something else. There were, I don't know if it's the case now, but during my university time and schooling time, during the week were times where people would go out. But then there was also that idea of being curfewed over that time so that you stayed home and you studied. Now, where are you going to make that choice as to, is this my time for studying or is this my time to go out? Whether to tell the truth or not, that's a big one. That's a constant one. Because you do know, and we all know that in our mind, when we know the truth and we're deciding not to tell it, we know that. There's no distinction about the fact that we don't know. Whether to try that cigarette or drug. I remember growing up in school and making a concrete choice decision that I'd never try ever a drug in my life. Now, others did in school. What was the difference? Choice. Whether to make that money, whether to eat that food. Right now, that's an ongoing battle, you know, as you try to manage your weight. The choice of whether you're going to eat that packet of sweets, or the choice of whether you're not. The choice whether you're going to have sugar, the choice whether you're not. Exercise or not. Oh, gosh. Talk about that, the lifelong battle choice. And that's a decision that you're making all the time, whether to stay or to go out. So we are constant, and these are just a few. Remember, we talked about 70,000 thoughts going through your mind per day. And those thoughts included in there are the different decision-making processes that we're making. So don't forget that you're making choices all the time. As you get older, and this is not even a phase or a place in terms of age, but a phase and a place in terms of progressing. Whether you're in grade 7, 8, or whether you're in grade 10 to 12, or whether you're in first year, second year varsity, or whether you're in 5 years working, or whether you're in your 50s, one of the things that you're going to be consistently able to start picking out and looking are the paths that people take in their lives. Because choices lead to consequences. Remember, I said earlier that one of the definitions of choices is the intention of the path that you're going to take. And particularly as you get older, you begin to ask yourself the question, but we all started from the same starting block. We all listened to the same teacher. We also probably had the same distance to walk to school. We all also had the same lessons. Why is it that this person has gone in one particular direction and the other person has gone in another particular direction? And I like these pictures because it just gives a sense of the path that you take. Are you going to start choosing and making the decisions that lead you down that gravel road where it's just bumpy and grindy and just very unpleasant? Or are you going to be the person who makes the choices and makes your path of life significantly different? Can you imagine being in your 70s or 80s? This is what I always think in my head when I think of people like, and I don't know if any of you know these names, but when I think of people like Bill Cosby, or when I think of people like our ex-president, or when I think of people who are spending their 60s, 70s, and 80s in and out of court because of the consequential effects of decisions that they made earlier that are affecting their lives. Why would you want to be so late in life dealing with the consequences of the decisions that you made in life? Why would you want your life to go through the difficult path or the difficult road? But that's because of choices. So the choices that you make create the habit of your choices. And this is important because when you get into the habit of making the wrong choices, it becomes a habit. They create your life experiences. And they also create the path that you choose. And when you sit and watch television and you listen to people who are on TV, who are going through their, major challenges, you ask themselves, but why did they do that? It is about this element of choice. The other thing that's going to happen in life is that not only is the experience of the choices going to be important, but sometimes you're going to actually have to make a decision about which direction you're going to choose. And nothing better than having a situation where you're not choosing between right and wrong, but choosing between two rights or two goods. That becomes more interesting, which is the better good and which is the better right, as opposed to being the person who chooses between right and wrong. Again, for those of you who, as you get older, I'm sure you're aware that sometimes you can come from exactly the same family. You can be siblings, brothers and sisters, whatever the case may be. But they, even having come from the same environment, take two different directions in terms of where they're going. So you need to choose your direction. And it comes back to that point of you have a light in you that shines. And everybody together has a light that shines. But there is a particular light that lights your path, which is the direction that you will have to take. And you'll have many of these, many points where you get to a split road where you have to make a call, where you have to make a decision. How will you start making those choices? And we'll talk about that just now. So I want you to take a look at this. And I want you in the chat, and I'm going to stop sharing for a second just now. I want you in the chat to tell me what you see. I'll be interested to get the perspective of what you see. Just go into the chat group and give me a sense of what you see. So let me stop sharing for a second. Oh, we've got more people. Great. Welcome, Tobago, Gilman, Mhlengi, and iPhone. I'm not sure who iPhone is. But I'll be interested to know that picture. I hope you all saw it. I'll be interested to know what you saw. Give me a sentence or a sentence in terms of what you see in that picture. Come on, the first one gets a Mars bar. Right, and Tombi says, a half full glass of water. Right? Come on, Laken. Tumisho. I hope your fingers are typing. A glass of water. Tumisho sees a glass of water. Half full as well. Ethan, what do you get? Okay, write that one again, Ethan. I just got Agar. Mhlengi, what do you get? What do you see? Half full glass of water. Bubbles. There you go. There you go. Something different. A glass of water, Ethan. Ntobeko. A full of water, a full glass of water. Oh, okay. Right. I see that the line that determines whether one sees it is half full or half empty. Nampendui. Right. And Kanye. All right, let's go back. So the interesting thing about that question is that there's no right or wrong answer. But what there is people's perspectives. Now, some of you had the same perspective, and some of you didn't. Some of you had very different perspectives, like the bubbles from Principle, etc. But the point here is that people, in terms of what they see, is going to be very different sometimes to what you see, let alone the fact that you're actually looking at the same thing. So therefore, some of the decisions that you make based on what other people are thinking or saying or seeing can be extremely dangerous if you haven't precisely started depicting for yourself what it is that you see. There's a tendency sometimes where your choices are made as a result of what others are doing. And that can be dangerous because, as you can see, we've just put a picture up here. And we've had 3 or 4 maybe different views of the same picture. Now imagine the implications of that when it comes to your life. Imagine the implication of somebody coming to you and saying, hey, let's do A, B, C, D, right? Because I think A, B, C, D is going to be easy, or it's going to be quick, or it's going to be fast, or it's going to be better, or it's going to be this, that, and the other. And you then jump onto the bandwagon of A, B, C, D, not because you've made a conclusive decision yourself, but your choices come from what. So it's critical. So it's critical that when making choices, your sense of perspective is clear in that choice that you're making. Otherwise, it could lead to some difficult situations. Okay, I always have this issue when I stop sharing and then come out to chat and then try and share again. Okay. Give me 1 second whilst we pick this up again. Not good. Okay, let's stop that. One second, I'll nail it in a minute. Can you all see that? There we go. Can you all see that? Somebody
yes, I can.
Fantastic. So another one, and I'm not going to go into asking questions on this one. Sorry, let me go back. Another one is this class. So this has always fascinated me, and I want you to think about. And I want you to think about the different varieties of perspective one can have towards, this picture that they're seeing. Perspective is important in making choices. If you do not develop the foundational elements of perspective, you are going to make choices based on popularity, peer group pressure, and a whole variety of different things that have nothing to do with your input, which is where perspective comes from. So in this one, some would say they see somebody holding a glass pouring water. Some would focus on the glass. But one of the most fascinating things that I have ever heard in terms of perspective was when somebody said, well, what I see is that I see the glass not being able to hold the water that's coming. Now, the difference between that perspective and any other perspective when you're just focusing on the glass is because you're focusing on the bigger picture. You're also focusing on implications. And these are the kind of ingredients or skills that one needs to start developing when they start developing this construct of being able to understand how to make the right choices. One of the things about choice is that it is the God-given gift that only human beings have. No one else actually has this ability to actually utilize. Remember, we spoke quite extensively about our brain. For those of you who weren't in that module, we'll run through that module with you later in the year. But we talked about the function and the capability of the brain. In terms of its ability and its neuroplasticity, its ability to regenerate itself, its ability to readapt itself in order to fit and choose some of the elements that you are thinking about, or some of the skills that you're thinking about, or some of the decisions that you're thinking about. You get up tomorrow morning and you decide, right, I don't know how to swim and I want to swim. You are going to have to call in the functionality of your brain, not to mention your body, in order to get that skill, capable. If you get up tomorrow morning and you say, I want to learn French. I've tried that several times and it doesn't really work. You are going to have to introduce the functionality of that brain of yours in order to do that. And those are the things, that gift to be able to do that, to make those choices and to apply them, is only a gift that human beings actually have. So the animal kingdom doesn't work on that. The animal kingdom works purely on instinct. That's why the lion has never actually thought about, actually, you know what? Instead of us looking for prey every time we're hungry, how about we kill prey and stick them in the fridge and keep them for the next 6 months so that when we're hungry, we can just pull them out of the fridge and eat them. They don't. They work on a moment by moment, day by day basis. The moment you start doing that, you are no different. The moment your reactions, your responses are not based on choice and perspective and become based on what you see around you and what everybody else is doing, then you're no different to the animal kingdom. And you're actually not utilizing that God-given capability that you have of making choices out of perspectives. Perspective and choices are going to require you to reflect. Reflection is going to require you to have some time. And we go back to right at the beginning, where the time that you spend is going to have to be set aside for yourself in order so that you can go through these processes. So you can never not live and go through this world of existence without coming to identify who you are, so that you can gain the right perspectives and therefore make the right choices as you proceed. It's great to have a whole variety in a group, and we get caught up in some of our environments, but we miss the importance of us having to make some of the calls that we have to make on our own. So I said something earlier on, and this is rather big, but one of the reasons I really like, having this conversation with yourselves is because there is what I call the deflection mode of life, where you can make trajectory changes if you have to. If you're on the progression of the path that you are comfortable with, great. But the reason why this is an important slide is because it's a bit of it's kind of, when I look at it, I kind of, I cringe a little bit. You are, who you are today is in part because of some of the choices you made yesterday. Now, usually I try to blame my circumstance. I try to blame my environment. I try to blame somebody something said, or somebody did something to me, or, there was a lot of work pressure, or I didn't like that thing there, or I externalize everything. But ultimately, who you are today is in part because of some of the choices that you made yesterday. So if your yesterday is today, then you have the capability to start making choices that when you look back 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, you can look back and say, hey, those were some of the most important choices that I made in my life. And I'm going to give you some examples of mine. When I look back, I have made some difficult and also challenging choices that have affected me. But what I am truly proud of is the fact that I've been able to deflect. I've been able to see that wise is he who learns from his mistakes, but even wiser are those who learn from other people's mistakes. I've been able to see that and move into a different direction. So as you chart the progression of your life and the choices that you make, you will make mistakes. Mistakes are fantastic things because they actually teach you something if you learn from them. There's a great quote from Ali that I love that says, if in your 50s you are still doing what you used to do in your 20s, then you have wasted 30 years of your life. And the point of that is, for every experience that you go through, for every decision that you make, learn from it and make a better one. As simple as, heck, I got 45% for what I studied, but I kind of know I only put in an hour and I should have put in 3 hours of the study. Learn from that. They don't have to be life-changing decisions. They have to be choices that you make that in small parts start changing the trajectory of your life. So remember this, who you are today is in part something to do with what the choices that you made yesterday. So how are you going to choose? This is the question. You're going to have to choose wisely, because remember what we said? Because time is going to be required for what you prepare, what you're going to need to prepare for. How many of us have thought of one thing, gone in that direction, and gone, yucks, I really didn't want to do this, and did a U-turn and went and did something else? We are a generation that did many of that. A lot of us in our generation are not even doing what we studied. That was the course that we took. So it is important that the things that you're going to spend time preparing for have some level of essence to who you are. Remember, we talked about your identity. Who are you? What do you love? What do you enjoy? What do you want to see change? What gets you up? I know, there's a quote of a gentleman who I listened to who says that from the age of 6, you can already tell what somebody is going to become if you pay attention. If I look at my daughter at 6 years old, she's an athlete. She just loves to be outdoors. She loves to exercise. She loves to jog. At 6, she loves to do yoga on TV. She loves to ballet, play golf, go to the gym, etc. So you can already see that's where her leaning is to. So if you can do that at that age, ask yourself the question now, because what you choose to become is the thing that you're going to have to work for and prepare for. And even if at this present moment you're not there, this is the time to start considering it and thinking about it and building up to those things that you are. So the choices that you've made in the past, or some of you are still going to make up, what we would now define as rudimentary choices, things that you like, friends, what to attend, when to attend it, which university to go, who you like, who you don't like, etc., what sports to watch and to play. But there are going to be some fundamental choices that you're going to have to make, some fundamental decisions that you're going to have to make that have a lifelong impact on you if not done correctly. Life about financials. How many people do I know who've started at a particular stage in life, and by the time they hit their 30s or 40s were financially in difficulties? But that was because of this thing about what can I afford? What are my financials? Where am I going to live? I know a family that got up in their 40s, immigrated to New Zealand. because they were complaining about the crime and this, that, and the other here. They landed in New Zealand, and there was that shooting that took place in New Zealand, and there was a whole lot of things. And they began to realize that the world is like this. So those conscious choices and decisions that friends, you're going to go through a whole process of life in terms of friends coming and going, managing your health, how to eat properly, picking what you believe in, your career, picking your spouse of the future. These are all important things. And when you have family, how are you going to bring up that family? How are you going to start making those choices? Are they going to be random luck? You're going to just take it as it comes when it comes, c'est la vie, etc., etc. It's important for one to start thinking about these things now. And how do you do that? Well, you actually start developing what's called guiding principles. Now, one of the things that when I look back on myself and I really think about how did I navigate some of the trajectories of my life, and I'll tell you a little bit about it now, I do realize that I spent quite a bit of time having Vic's do's and don'ts. So there was a whole series of do's and don'ts that sort of started playing in my mind. And when I started them, they started escalating. And I'm going to tell you about a couple of those do's and don'ts. And I'm going to tell you about a couple of trajectory changes that happened in my life. And I'll tell you probably one of the most significant ones, and then I'm going to take you back in time. One of the most significant ones was, and I think some of you have heard the story, and apologies if you have, was when I failed my final year exams, my equivalent of matric, my last year university entry exams. And I didn't fail them partially, I failed them tremendously. Now, the irony of the story is that where I was doing schooling, there were two exams that you wrote. There was the O-level exam, and the O-level gave you permission to go and write A-levels, right? And most people who didn't pass O-levels dropped out of school and went on to do, other colleges or technicons or whatever the case may be. And because I wasn't so proficient at school, I was really advised by my geography teacher at the time, a teacher called Mr. Day, to consider thinking about quitting school at O-levels. In other words, write your O-levels, you're gonna fail, leave school, go and find some work, because you're not gonna make it to the exams that actually give you access to university and tertiary, which were called A-levels. And at that particular moment, I remember making my first decision. I must have been about 15. I made my first, that was probably my first major decision around my academia, where I said, Mr. Day said to me, I remember his name vividly, I'm 52, I still remember his name. He said to me, Rankin, if anybody ever offers you a job, before you take your exams, I'd advise you to take it. And that stayed with me because I said to myself, okay, he doesn't think I'm gonna make this. So this is what I'm gonna do. Choice, I'm gonna make this. And I ended up writing those exams, passing his subject, Mr. Day's subject, with a C. And that was tremendous for me because if I got an E, I was usually happy because it wasn't an F. But I actually managed to get that O-level exams, and I actually managed to pass tremendously well to be able to go and do my A-levels, which were your last year exams of school, like matricas. But somewhere between those 2 years of writing my final exams, something went a little haywire in my world, and I failed my final year exams, and I failed them badly. I literally, I had 2 subjects. Most people wrote 3 subjects for that final year exam. That was A-levels, you wrote 3. The really, really smart ones wrote 4 subjects, and I wrote 2. And I still failed them tremendously. And what happened from there was that my parents were so disappointed that they banished me. I was asked to leave home, and I was sent to go and stay in the UK with relatives, and literally dumped and said, figure it out for yourself. And I had to make a call. And one of the first calls I made, based on some guiding principles that I had set myself, was that I was going to repeat. So I'll come to those guiding principles now, but the story I want to tell you on this point was that when I then put my mind to this and said, I'm going to repeat this, I didn't write 2 A levels. I wrote 4. Remember, a year before I'd written 2 and flunked the 2, I actually went and I took 4 A levels. And I took 4 A levels, having failed with a U and an F with 2, and got 3 Bs and a C. Now, what was the difference between Vic then and Vic a year later? Choice. I made a concrete decision about the intentionality of my life. I focused on it, and I got the result that I was looking for. So this is not for the extraordinary, because if Vic, the one who failed before, can do it, anybody can do it. But what I tend to find is that the intentionality of choices, people miss how much that defines the outcome and results that you get. So guiding principles are important. And let me flick to these guiding principles that I had. My first one that I recall was being an adopted child. As an adopted child, I was adopted into the Rankin family. And I remember at 6 years old, making a conscious decision to block my life out completely and focus on this Rankin family. I said, I'll be part of this Rankin family. They're my real family, and everything else that's happened in my life is gone, right? And that was a very interesting psychological thing for me, because what eventually happened is until up at the age of 25, from 6 to 25, very few people who were around me ever knew I was adopted. I only started coming out at about the age of 23, 24, 25 to say, hey, by the way, this is not really my biological family. I moved to the UK, where I had 3 brothers and sisters. And that's the first earliest recollection of a very deliberate choice I made. My mother wrote a book, and the book, in it, she had said, she has 1 child and an adopted child. And I asked her never to write adopted ever again, and she never did mention the word adopted ever again. But those are the kind of things that I'm talking about that can affect your consciousness when you make certain choices, even as young an age as 6 years old. And I recall that very well. So the other one, yes, until I was 25, I didn't know anything about my other family, and then got to know them later on. The other one that is the one that I've just told you now. By the time I was 7 years old, between 7 years old and 16 years old, I had lived in 7 different countries and been to 6, different schools. So I struggled at school. I was not a scholar. And one of the things that I did is watching people who failed classes. And there were lots of people who in your school, I'm sure they fail a subject, they fail this, they fail that. I remember making a decision around about 16 years old that if I ever failed anything once, I'd never fail it again. So hence the story now about me repeating and making that concrete decision. So these guiding principles were personal to me. They were my ones. And the important thing about guiding principles is they have to be personal to you. They have to be the things that differentiate you in terms of how you're going to go forward. So what I want you to start doing, I want you to start thinking about, depending on which stage you are in life and age you are in life, I want you to start thinking about the 1 or 2 guiding principles that you have, the do's and don'ts of your life, the things that are actually going to take you forward all the way through into the rest of your life. It's important, because those are the things that are going to be the foundational parts of how you start making choices and decisions, and start creating a perspective for yourself. That, by the way, what happens with these perspectives is that, as I told you about the brain, is that there's a whole physical and metaphysical thing that changes. So I went into, for me to be able to write 4 subjects, I went into quarantine, literally isolation. For 1 solid year, I separated myself from the rest of the world, and all I did was focus on the objective I had, which was to pass my A levels and make it to university. That was it. So what happens with the choices that you make are either intentional consequences that are positive, or unintentional consequences that can sometimes be negative. Sometimes unintentional consequences are nice, which are positive. Oh, I didn't expect that to happen. great, but you always want to be intentional in terms of the outcomes that you're looking for. So what are the guiding principles that start defining who you are? And this talks about me doing my in Scotland. So I want to end on this and then take some questions for the last sort of 15 minutes. Nelson Mandela made a choice. Right from the early parts of his life, he made a decision that he was going to fight for the liberation of this country, irrespective of what it costed. That's a choice. And when he talks about may your choices reflect your hopes and not your fears, in that choice that he made, he was thinking about the hope he had of what South Africa can look like if we can get rid of this thing that's hanging around us called apartheid. But that came with significant impact on his life. You know that. But what I always find truly an amazing story about how the world works positively for you, is that you may talk about the fact that Mandela went to jail for 27 years for a cause that he believed in, for a choice that he made. But if you ask the entire world today, who is the one most iconic leader that's left the greatest legacy, not just when he passed away, but also when he's alive, when he was alive, 99% of the people in the world will say Nelson Mandela. The impact that he had in making a single choice for a small little country in the south of Africa reverberated to impacting human beings all over the entire world, irrespective of the fact that 27 of those years were spent in jail. So if I was to take a measure of whether this was positive or negative, it would be undescribable how positive it was, and the kind of experience that not only did he have when he was alive and leading this country, and even after he led the country, but the legacy that continues to this day and will continue for a lifetime and lifetimes because of the choice that he made right at the beginning. So, positive choices, choices that you make, as small as they may be for now, can inspire people that are directly in front of you, can inspire you when you look at yourself in the mirror every day. But more importantly, as you create a habit of making positive, good, intentional choices, they can have a fundamental impact on your surroundings, your community, your country, and eventually the world. So think about that. Don't let your choices reflect your fears. Let your choices reflect your hope in every little thing that you do, including that textbook that you're going to have to open tomorrow, or whatever else that you're going to have to do tomorrow. Let it constantly reflect the positiveness that you want to have in the future.